Note instant react for the Cleveland Browns week 3 of the 2022 season. The Browns were winners tonight, 29-17 over the hated Pittsburgh Steelers. We got quite a bit to unwrap with this. I got a lot of game notes, so we're just going to kind of jump right into this here because it's late and I need to go to bed. As you can actually see there, there's the final. Now, that 29-17 is a little deceptive because the Browns got a touchdown on the final play of the game, a defensive play when, Pittsburgh tried to lateral and head backwards and everything from their own 4-yard line. Myles Garrett actually was quiet most of the evening, only really accounting for 2 assisted tackles, and then he was also involved in the final play where he helped knock the ball loose. The ball got shuffled into the end zone where it was fallen on by Denzel Ward. And there's your final score. Before the game, the new Cleveland Cavaliers star guard Donovan Mitchell was one of the honorary dog pound captains, along with All-Star Darius Garland. Now Mitchell, growing up a Browns fan, um, the organization decided it was going to be a nice idea for him to do the new tradition, which is smashing a faux guitar in the dog pound that was painted all in Steeler colors and everything. Um, right away, you could tell that something was developing. They wanted to try and get Amari Cooper involved, and that certainly was the case because over the course of just the last 4 days since Sunday, um, and including Sunday's game, Brissett has developed a very good rapport with Amari Cooper. Let's throw up Amari Cooper's stat line and show you just how good it was. 7 catches for 101 yards and a touchdown. Cooper, uh, Cooper. Also, it would have been a lot more had he not stepped out and then come back in um, on a key play that resulted in a penalty where the Browns actually, I think, ended up picking up the first down on the following play or like 2 plays later. Anyway, I'm trying to remember now. That might have been in the second quarter, um, but it was definitely something where Brissett did not seem rattled. He put Sunday behind him because he knew that Sunday was not his fault. That was all on the defense. And early on, it looked like um, more of the same was going to happen because the majority of the first quarter and also part of the second quarter, the Steelers could really kind of do whatever they wanted. Mitch Trubisky was always seeming to find guys, open or threading needles. The Browns were not playing man; they were playing zone on defense. They were off the ball quite a bit. Najee Harris was actually gashing them in a lot of short yardage, although he didn't actually break any big ones. Um, but and the Steelers really as a team didn't rush for they rushed for barely 100 yards. Nick Chubb outrushed the Steelers on his own, and we'll get to Chubb here in a couple of minutes. But the other player that the Browns really wanted to get involved was David Njoku, who honestly, through the first 2 weeks, has done nothing for that massive contract. Njoku broke out in a huge way tonight. As you could see, 9 catches, 89 yards, and a touchdown. I would have liked to seen them maybe target him in the fourth quarter, maybe get him up over 100 yards as well. And this way, they could actually say that they had a running back and 2 receivers who all had over 100 yards, and that hasn't happened for them in quite a few years. Um, I want to say it's been at least 5. Um, every time that Kareem Hunt spelled Nick Chubb, because Chubb was definitely a workhorse. Chubb, 23 carries, 113 yards, as we talked about a couple of moments ago. And actually, I don't think we have. But Chubb had his moments, broke off a 36-yard run, and and honestly, on the first drive of the game, if if he doesn't get clipped in the knee trying to leap over a defender, Nick Chubb goes to the house on a 60 some odd yard run, and that just really kind of set the tone. The Browns go down the field. They get a touchdown. Um, it was a perfectly thrown ball through two Steeler defenders to Amari Cooper from about 12 yards out, and the Browns take the lead 7-0. We're not going to go down the entire scoring, you know, run down completely. The problem with the Browns on offense right now is really their offensive line. Still trying to work guys in and work guys out. Jack Conklin was back tonight after his injuries, ended his year early last year. Jed Wills looked like a fish out of water all night. Now, Wills did get rolled up on sometime in the second quarter and did actually come out for a little while. And then when he actually came back in, he was getting beat constantly. And the Steelers started lining up Highsmith and Cam Hayward over him and were starting to collapse the pocket on Brissett, but Brissett did a very good job of getting the ball out early. They said that the graphics showed that he was laser sharp when he actually was getting rid of the ball in under 2.5 seconds. And when he wasn't, there were large holes for Chubb and Hunt to get through. If again they weren't breaking the big ones, except for that big 36-yarder from Nick Chubb, but at every time the Browns needed something in short yardage, they got it. The issue with the Browns defense is they had no pass rush whatsoever. It shows you just how much they missed Jadeveon Clowney tonight. Their first sack of Mitch Trubisky wasn't until 5 minutes left in the game, and it was by Jacob Phillips, who ironically enough, towards the end of the game, had a big pass breakup with the Steelers driving for a touchdown to pull them within a field goal. And Pittsburgh eventually settles for a field goal. And then thankfully, their young rookie stud receiver Pickens goes offside on the onside kick, and then the onside kick ends up deflecting out of bounds. Otherwise, we might have actually seen a replay of what happened on Sunday. And if that were the case, or if the Steelers would have gone 96 yards in 9 seconds after starting the final drive on their own 4-yard line after a perfect punt by Corey Brahocas. I actually put it out on Twitter. Do you just fold the franchise at that point? Brissett had a couple. He did run 3 times and had 11 yards. As a matter of fact, he actually almost broke one of them to the house. But all 3 plays were quarterback sneaks on very short yardage, 4th and 1s, 3rd and 1s. And they were perfectly timed because he didn't actually rush directly into the pile. He waited for the pile to collapse and then went off guard all 3 times. And again, with one of them down deep in Steeler territory in the second quarter, he ends up extending the drive, and that actually led to the Njoku touchdown. Cade York did miss another extra point in the second quarter, and this one hit the upright, but it was not cause for alarm because if you actually go back and you look at his kicks and also Chris Boswell's for Pittsburgh, the ball was swirling all night long. If you go back and look at the second extra point and see as the ball approached the goalpost, just how much it moved and it pushed, and even the one that he converted on the Nick Chubb touchdown in the fourth quarter, the ball, he just tried to line drive it, and then once it again got down to about maybe the 5-yard line or right as it was hitting the goal line, you could see the wind just push the ball everywhere, to where you're white knuckling whatever couch, blanket, steering wheel, wherever you were listening, you were white knuckling with the way that Jim Donovan was calling it or how it looked on TV. So again, it was certainly not his fault. The one on Sunday was his fault, but the missed extra point, I'm certainly not going to put on him because of the weather conditions. And with as unpredictable as it was, he could have been aiming towards the sideline and you wouldn't have known where that ball was going to go. Chubb's fourth quarter touchdown, he actually ended up lining behind Halte Frolt, who is a reserve guard, and Holt is 6'5", 310. After they decided not to keep Andy Janovich, I would like to actually see them use some of these reserve offensive linemen like Frolt in the as kind of that fullback. Imagine trying to run behind that because those guys are paid to block. They're not going to get the ball, but you're not going to be but he's large enough to be able to pick up two defenders. If somebody kind of gets in on a stunt or a delay, he can actually pick them up and blow them out of the way if it's one-on-one. The defense did suffer a key injury. Anthony Walker did actually go down in the second quarter, and it looked to be pretty serious. The knee definitely looked to buckle. He immediately crumpled down face first. To look like he fell like a sack of hammers, and they did actually bring a cart out. They actually put his leg in an air cast, but thankfully, Kevin Stefanski said that Walker has a knee sprain, and he's going for an MRI, so they'll be able to see what the extent of it is. Hopefully, it's just something where he might, if he goes on short-term injured reserve, it's 4 games, could be 6. I don't see this as a season-ending injury, but after Walker left, Jacob Phillips coming in did a very, very good job, and it's good to actually see Phillips performing this well, considering he had a very good 2020 and then kind of fell to the wayside or came back down to earth last year. So if Phillips is actually going to get an opportunity while Walker is out, I would certainly like to. I would like to maybe see the Browns kind of get out of the 4-2-5 for a little bit, maybe go to a more traditional 4-3, and with the idea of running JOK, Phillips, and Sione Takitaki as those 3 linebackers. I actually feel that that's a lot of speed. That's a lot of young talent out there that can definitely get after the ball and moves very, very well from sideline to sideline as opposed to north-south. And all 3 of those guys can play pretty well in short yardage or play underneath if the secondary is in cover 2. If they're still going to stay with the 4-2-5, I would actually like to see him get a few more reps in the rotation with that. The defense did seem to find a second gear in the second quarter. In the third quarter after taking the lead. But it is something that, and we know that they did. They've given up 34 fourth quarter points in the first 2 games. 17 points apiece to Carolina, 17 points to the Jets, and they only gave up 3, and it was a meaningless field goal with already up 9 points with just over 2 minutes to play at that point. But it's definitely something that you could see that they were hawking at the ball. They were hitting with a little bit more emphasis. They even the cushions seemed to get a little bit tighter. They still did not go man to man. That drive that allowed Pittsburgh to set up for the field goal, they did go straight down the field. The Steelers went right down the field on the Browns, but every single time a Steeler player caught the ball, they were punished for it. The Pittsburgh tight end had took two really good licks on passes that he caught on that drive. Uh, Corey Bojorquez had a little bit of an interesting game. It started off badly because his first punt was partially blocked in the first quarter. It eventually, I think, only went about 25 yards, and it set up it set up the Steelers' first score. His next punt wasn't until 5 minutes and 40 seconds left to go in the game. And then his last one was an absolute dime that went out of bounds on the 4 yard line. The special teams definitely looked a lot better. There were no muffed punts, although um, there was a return in the third quarter that in the third quarter that the returner took it from 3 yards deep and only got out to the 12-yard line. Then the Browns proceeded to go right down the field and score eventually with that drive. Neither team committed a turnover, which was nice. I don't remember outside of the Brissett interception. I think that was the lone turnover the Browns had last week. They did actually have a couple against I don't honestly, I'd have to go back. I don't even remember one against Carolina, but that one was now 2 weeks ago and is essentially a blur to most of us. They do need to shore up. The defense needs a lot of work. They need, although again they did actually benefit from a Steeler team in rebuild modes. The Steelers have a lot of very young players at the skill positions. Chase Claypool, Najee Harris, Pickens. Pickens is a rookie, and we're going to talk about Pickens here in just a second. I think you know what I'm going to discuss. And they've also got Mitch Trubisky in his first year starting with them, coming over and trying to fill in for a Hall of Famer in Ben Roethlisberger, and he's just keeping the seat warm until they're eventually ready to pull the trigger on Kenny Pickett. And honestly, if you're a Steeler fan, you almost have to start thinking that you may need to pull the trigger. You might need to give him first team reps in practice going into their next game against the Jets here in a couple of weeks. And it would be a perfect opportunity. You've lost back-to-back games that you were actually in for a while up until the second half. You actually were playing very well in the first half, and then the second half kind of got away from you a little bit. And you could definitely tell with the running of Chunt, as we call them, Chubb and Hunt, in the second half, they definitely wore down and broke down the Steeler front seven after a while. But again, if you're a Steeler fan, you've drafted Pickett as the heir apparent. He's the local guy. Played his college ball at Pitt. Was an ACC Player of the Year. Was the number one quarterback off the board in the draft earlier this spring, and you can't have him sitting there waiting. I understand that the Steelers are going to be a 500 team at best this year. They are not going to be a playoff team. They are, and if they do, they squeak in on the absolute back end with owning a couple of tiebreakers. I know you don't want to get the kid beat up. I know that, but the problem is you're not in a position where you're absolutely forced to throw him in because you've got no other option like you had with Arizona and Kyler Murray. Or some of the other young guns out there. Buffalo waited a little bit before they moved to Josh Allen when they drafted him. Baker Mayfield sat out 3 games, but that's also because Hugh Jackson's a complete friggin' moron and out of football, and honestly should never be coaching in football at the NFL level again. Period. End of discussion. But the Steelers, Mike Tomlin has never had a losing season. He has missed the playoffs 7 times in his career. Um, but it's something that, how short of a leash do you actually have? Trubisky can win you games in this league, but the Steelers situation right now, and I can't believe I'm still talking about the Pittsburgh Squealers for this long, but it's kind of like what's going on with the Browns. You've actually got your heir apparent quarterback waiting in the wings, and the guy who's starting for you right now is just biding time. The only problem is that Jacoby Brissett is just sitting there biding time until Deshaun Watson comes back off of his suspension. And kudos to the Amazon Prime production team for discussing the situation live on the broadcast. That a lot of that so far I don't recall CBS discussing with during the Browns' first 2 games, and not so much going into great detail, but definitely talking about it enough. And I do actually commend Al Michaels for making the joke that you had Johnny Manziel. That didn't work out. Baker Mayfield was successful for a few years. He's now in Carolina. If the Deshaun Watson thing doesn't work, do you exhume the grave of Otto Graham? At this particular point, you could probably suit up Bernie, and he wouldn't be any worse off than what you have. But if something happens with Watson, I'm starting to gain a little bit more confidence in Jacoby Brissett as capable to go out and win you a game if you need to. He's not going to get you a deep run into a playoff, but if you need him to come in as a reserve, you now know that he's comfortable enough with the offense to be able to move the ball. He's gotten better every week. He was very shaky in the first game against Carolina. He looked to be settling in a little bit last week. And honestly, if you're a Cleveland Browns fan, offensively, this was their most complete and solid offensive game plan of the season. The defense still needs a lot of work. Joe Woods needs to be fired. But I've got a lot more confidence in the offense the more things progress. And going into Atlanta, you have 8 days worth of rest to get some of your guys right, get them work on a few extra things, throw a couple of extra wrinkles in there. More importantly, kind of take the with the extra couple of days, you give the guys a couple of days off because they were punished where they could, because the Steelers hit heavy. The Steelers always hit heavy. But it also gives Brissett even more opportunity to be able to bond and develop cohesiveness with some of his other targets. I'd actually like to see what they can do maybe with Harrison Bryant. I'd like to actually see David Bell get involved a little bit. Donovan Peoples-Jones has been relatively quiet thus far because now Amari Cooper is starting to establish himself, and after tonight probably has established himself as the number one that they hoped he would be when they traded for him back in the spring, that got this whole ball rolling of shaking up the franchise. And especially wearing Tim Couch's number. And, it's also good to see somebody wearing that number to being productive, because again, it was Couch, and then, injuries kind of sidetracked what he could have been. And then you had Johnny Manziel that, albeit for 2 games, you actually had optimism, and then drama just sit in. But Cooper showed up and showed out tonight. And when Cooper is healthy, he is a very, very good receiver. And I did like using the tight end tonight a lot more than you have in the first 2 games. Honestly, combined, there was even a jump pass. I want to say there was a third down that you needed to convert. I want to say it was a 3rd and 12, and Brissett jumped past it to Njoku when the pocket was collapsing, and Njoku kind of did the rest and muscled himself for a first down, kept the drive going. The Browns chewed up a lot of clock on some of their scoring drives. The Chubb touchdown was a 12 play drive that ate up almost 6.5 minutes. It's if Kevin Stefanski is not going to give up the offensive play calling, it's definitely something that he needs to kind of slow it down. You notice he's not getting cute as he did the last couple of years. I wanted to start a campaign last year that every time he went for it on fourth down and missed, the ownership group should have fined him $10,000, and he actually at that point would have been out the better part of a game check by the end of the year. But the Browns did go for it on fourth down a couple of times tonight. They did get quite a few conversions. They did not fail on a fourth down. They were 6 of 11 on third down. They held the Steelers, I want to say, to 2 of 8 or 2 of 9 or something like that on fourth down. And the fourth downs were very manageable that they went for. They were fourth and short and fourth and a yard, and we weren't talking 4th and 5, 4th and 6, 4th and 10, something like that, where it's in that between the 40s yard where it's too long to kick and too short to punt. Especially with the wind as unpredictable as it was tonight. How'd the line go? I don't care if he had the wind in his back and song in his heart, he wouldn't have had the leg. York wouldn't have been able to hit. York would have certainly had the leg, to hit something from 70 tonight with the way that the wind was blowing, but the way that it was swirling again down in the end zones. When you have the wind at your back, you don't know where it's going and you don't know when it's going to gust up. There were times where they showed the flags or the end zone cams, and the flags were barely moving, and then there were other times they would gust up and the flags would be pointing almost straight ahead at one point. So what did you guys think of tonight's game? Let me know in the comments down below. I will certainly respond to anything that I see, and we will be back with you certainly for Browns React next, not this coming Sunday, but the Sunday after. I'm looking forward to, I'm hoping that the local CBS affiliate puts on the Bills-Dolphins game so I can see my Bills this weekend. But I got a feeling they're going to end up showing Indianapolis and Kansas City, and I can't imagine why, because Buffalo and Miami is a much better game with both of them 2-0, and especially with the game that Miami had last week, and that come from behind against Baltimore. But again, let me know what you guys think. I will have some new Sports Note content sometime this weekend. We got some very good college football coming up. We've got pennant races winding down in baseball. My Cardinals and my Guardians could both end up clinching sometime this weekend. The Guardians just ended up sweeping the Chicago White Sox. The magic number is now down to 5, and for trailing Minnesota for most of the year, the Twins are now 5 games under 500, and are about to be eliminated outright. Their magic number for being eliminated in the Central is only 3, and I want to say their magic number for being eliminated from the entire playoffs is somewhere around 6 or 7. With 2 weeks to go, I can't believe Minnesota fell apart the way that they have. But the Guardians are the team that nobody wants to play right now. It's because they are beating up on some bad teams, and this will also be interesting to see because they still have a 3-game series against Tampa and a 3-game series against Seattle still on their schedule over the course of the last 2.5 weeks of the season. Even though they finish with a 6-game series against Kansas City, and they're going to make the Yankees feel a little bit of heat. They're not going to catch the Yankees, but they are going to be nipping at the Yankees' heels by the time the final standings come down as we get into the playoffs. And it's going to be interesting. Are they, with them basically guaranteed to be locked into that third seed? Is it going to be Tampa? Is it going to be Seattle at this point? Because that's what it's looking like. I don't think it's going to be Toronto. I think Toronto either surges ahead and gets that 4. I don't see Toronto falling back for where they are into that 6. But again, let me know what you guys think, and I will see you guys very, very soon. Take care and good night.